Hello. So if you like the content of this video and or previous videos, please like, subscribe, comment, and or share my YouTube page. I truly believe that what I say in these videos is meant to reach people, and I appreciate you helping me in that goal. So today's video is about God. And it's three parts. So the first part is being triggered by God and or the concept of God and really just learning to embrace that. The second part is about wrestling with God and the really powerfulness of that. And the last part is about the powerful times in your life when you don't believe in God, how short or long those may be, and how that can really be transforming and really a good thing. And you should, again, embrace those times as well. So diving right in. So if you've watched any of my previous videos, you know that anytime I use the word God, or I quote a Bible passage, or I talk about a story from something that Jesus said, I have a disclaimer. And the disclaimer is, one, I am not Christian. I am not Catholic. I don't associate with one way of thinking spirituality-wise. I have gotten to the point where I'm at by being able to connect and hear with something bigger through every single outlet possible. I can watch a Christian sermon and I can be like, whoa, I get it. I feel it. I see where you're coming from. I can listen to a Catholic homily and I can get something out of it. I can go to the Center for Spiritual Living and they can talk about something that Ernest Holmes talks about, which Richard Rohr, who's a Catholic priest, also talks about, which is the Christ consciousness, and I can really connect with it. I can go to read a Buddhist book and just connect with it. So I can go on and on and on about the spiritual ways in which I can connect with this something bigger, this divine thing. And I want to add in, for me, I can connect with it in the day-to-day ordinary things. I can watch a TV show and I can be like, whoa, did something just talk to me through that? Was that just a really powerful message that was meant to get to me? Yes, it was. And I don't know if this is the right time to bring it up, but I'm going to bring it up anyway. So I was watching this woman do a sermon, and I'm not 100% sure what religion she was associated with, but she said, and it just really resonated with me, she said, God will meet you where you are. And she paused. And she said, because God sure as hell ain't gonna meet you where you aren't. And that just really resonated with me because, like I said, I can hear, I can feel, I can connect with something divine outside of anything that you would think would be divine. So that was a really long explanation to say that my first disclaimer is I don't associate with any one religion. My goal is not to get you to associate with any one religion. I'm not even 100% sure what my goal is at this point. But I know I'm being called to something, and so I keep taking the next right step. Now, the second part of my disclaimer is that I've been there, that the word God, that the Bible, that Jesus can just wreak havoc on your nervous system for multiple reasons, right? It's been used and misused and overused in a countless number of ways. And I could go into all of those ways, but if you are triggered by that word, I don't need to. But I'm going to anyway, just a little bit. So, for me personally, because I can't speak on the broad level, but for me personally, especially when I started branching out from one way of thinking, there was lots of condemning. There was lots of people focusing on being saved by Jesus, but not doing anything Jesus said, and thinking that they were morally superior, even though I may not believe in Jesus, but I was doing everything he said. Lots of there have been wars started over this sort of thing, right? Now, having said that, here has been my experience that I want you to hear. Everybody is human, and everyone is an asshole, regardless of whether they believe in God or not. And if you, like I've said in a previous video, if you are looking for a perfect person before you're going to believe in things that they say, you are never going to believe in anything anybody says. So in my own life, I grew up Catholic, and in high school, I went to a public school that was not Catholic, and I was judged, berated, looked down upon, condemned for believing in God and believing in Jesus. I felt very isolated. I felt very belittled. Now, having said that, there was an experience that I had my senior year that forced me to grow, that I'll talk about later, and then I went back to a Catholic college. And so I didn't believe in God in the same way that I did. And people belittled me, made me feel less than, condemned me, and judged me. So, it doesn't matter if people believe in God or don't believe in God. People are going to be people. They are going to be imperfect. They are going to judge. They are going to condemn. They are going to think they are morally superior. And for me, how I got past my trigger was to separate the two. Here's a human trying to understand a divine concept horribly. Here's a human who has felt belittled by a divine concept and who is reacting horribly. It has nothing to do with the divine concept or the idea of God. It has to do with us humans all being assholes regardless. And that has really helped me personally get past my trigger. Because it wasn't that I'm triggered by God or the concept of God, and maybe I am a little bit, we'll talk about that later. I was more triggered by people being assholes. And I have a harsh reality to tell you right now. You too are an asshole. I can be an asshole, right? That's it. Now, having said that, I think it's really important to embrace the trigger. And here's why. So after college, I was very eclectic. Let me back up a little bit. So I was raised Catholic, and I really believed God saves. I really believed God helps. I really believed that if you believe in God, you'll be taken care of. And I had an eating disorder in high school. And it was the darkest time. High school and college were some of the darkest times in my life. And by the senior year, obviously I was Catholic, and so I had prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed for relief. And relief was not coming. And finally, in my senior summer, I read something that got me to say, your concept of God and the world is, I don't even know how to say this. You're stuck because your concept of God and the divine is stuck. This story doesn't make sense anymore. You're praying and prayers aren't being answered. What the F? And at that time, I was at an impasse, right? I could stick with what I was believing, with this childhood belief of how I understood God, or I could finally let the thing that was tearing me apart tear me apart. And when I did, it opened me up to, wait a second, this doesn't make sense. That was the first time that I said, wait a second, this this doesn't make sense. And I know this isn't going to resonate with everybody, especially people who just have like, it's not going to resonate with anybody, but I just said this doesn't make sense to me. And very clearly at that time, I felt something, and I'm not going to go into it right now, but long story short, my idea of God and the world expanded, and I was no longer Catholic. I just felt, and I felt a divine opening. And what I think was happening over those 4 years was God, divine spirit was saying, clearly this belief system is too small. Clearly this belief system isn't working. You are miserable. You are praying and your prayers are not being answered. Does that sound reasonable? And finally I hit a breaking point and I said, no, it doesn't. It doesn't. And that's when I kind of slowly started opening up to, okay, things aren't quite making sense here. And I allowed myself to have the, I allowed myself to embrace the F you, whatever divine being that you are. This is bullshit. I really did. I allowed myself to embrace that. I allowed myself to say, this is fucking bullshit. I've done everything right. I've done everything you've wanted. I've prayed and I'm still in this miserable hell. What the heck, dude? And it was like, yes! Yes! You got it. What the heck? This is bullshit. Now we're ready to do the work. Now we're ready to do the work. And I finally started opening up. And having said that, I didn't open up. It took me a while to, obviously everything's a journey, so it took me a while to open up. But I was opening up, I was, kind of experimenting with God, like reading different things, understanding God on a different level, understanding God beyond the Catholic way of thinking of God, not necessarily throwing it, to the wayside, because again, I think every religion has something to offer, but just expanding my idea. And I went to college and things got better, but still not great. Right? And I'm going to give you a story to explain this time. So when I got out of college, I went to a Catholic church with somebody. And I was at a point where I could get something out of a Catholic church, but I could also get something out of a Christian church. So I went to a Catholic church with somebody, and the priest brought up the story of Jacob. And even though I went to Catholic school for 12 years, I'm going to butcher this story, but Jacob had a brother, and I don't remember his name, but his brother was favored over him. And in that time, if your brother is favored over you, they were going to take on the legacy of their father. But the mother really wanted Jacob to take up the legacy. So they defeated, don't know what the word is there. Long story short, they lied to their father, who was blind, and his brother was really hairy, and so he put on some lamb's hair, and he went to his father, and he said, can't remember his name for the life of me, I'm my brother, right? He tricked him into saying, I'm my brother, give me the blessing to take on your legacy, give me the blessing to be your heir, because I'm the one who's meant to do it. So he lied, he deceited? God, I can't remember that word for whatever reason. But anyway, so he did that. And obviously the father believed him, and he became the heir. Not 100% sure about that. But the point of that was that he wrestled with doing the wrong thing, and he did it. He did the wrong thing. He wrestled with what the Bible calls the devil. And what he talks about is how later in life, Jacob is asleep, and he's woken up by God, who comes in the form of an angel, okay, because it doesn't matter. He comes in the form of an angel. And they fight and they wrestle, and long story short, then the angel leaves. And read the story, because I don't remember it right now, sorry. The point is, what the father said at the end of this homily, and he ended it with this, it was just such a powerful mic drop moment. He said, when we're younger, we wrestle with the devil. And when we're older, we wrestle with God. When we're younger, we wrestle with the devil. And when we're older, we wrestle with God. And for me, what that meant is when I was younger, there was a villain. There was this entity, there was this thing that was causing all my hurt, all my pain, that was causing all these bad things in the world. As I started getting older, I started thinking, but God is omnipresent, God is omnipowerful. And everybody has their own explanation for that. But for me, it didn't make sense. And Buddha says, don't believe anything anybody tells you, not even if I told you. Don't believe anything unless you come to understand it and agree with it. And so I just wasn't agreeing with this. I just said, it doesn't make sense to me. And so then I started wrestling with God. And by wrestling with God, I let go of old belief systems that were holding me back. By wrestling with God, I came to know the divine, came to know spirit, came to get a greater understanding of the world and my connection to something bigger, because I was not afraid to say, what the fuck, dude? What the fuck? The amount of times that I have said to the universe, God, spirit, what the fuck, is outrageous. And it is because I have been willing to have those conversations that I am where I'm at today. So, I talked about having really hard times in high school, but I had really, even though I was slowly breaking through after my senior year, I was still having a hard time, right? I was still like, okay, I can let go of some of the beliefs that I had, but it's still not quite right. I was still kind of like afraid to really, again, wrestle with God. It was just confusion. And again, during college, I just was praying. I remember one time I was praying in my dorm room, and I was just bawling, and I think I called my mom or my dad, I can't remember who, and I just said, I want this to end. Like this darkness that has will not leave me alone. I want this to end. And I've just been prayed to God. I have prayed over and over again, and nothing. I just said, tell me what to do. Please tell me what to do. Please, please, please. And nothing. I am still here. I am still miserable. I can't believe I'm still here. What the hell, right? And again, it just was really forcing me to say, doesn't feel right. Something is off. Like, this can't be life. This can't be praying and not hearing something. This doesn't make sense. And it reminds me of a song by The Fray. And it just touches my soul every time I hear it. And I don't know what the name of the song is now that I think about it. It doesn't matter, but he says, I found God. He was smoking his last cigarette on the corner of a street. And he said, how's it going? And I said, where have you been? I have been calling you for years and years and years, and you did not answer when all I needed was just a breadcrumb and nothing. Where were you? And how do you have the nerve to be on the corner of this street smoking a cigarette saying, hey? And I resonated so much with that because I felt that in my bones. Like I felt I had been praying to you. I had been calling to you. You made me grow up and believe that you would take care of me. And I have been asking for relief, and I am at year 8, and you have been silent. You are a mother effer. If you exist, you are a mother effer. And again, through that raw conversation, I grew. Through that raw conversation, I was forced to say, here's a part of what I have been taught about God and the divine that makes no sense. And so I want effing answers. Excuse my language, but that's where I was at. I want effing answers. I'm not going to live like this. This isn't right. You can't tell me that you love me. You can't tell me that you care about me. You can't tell me that I am your divine creation and then leave me here. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to have all this evil in the world and you being this all-powerful, all-loving God, and let this happen. And I understand, okay, fine, maybe there's this idea of, well, you just have to pray to change it. I have been praying. Where have you been? Again, wrestling with God. This doesn't make sense. Things aren't clear. And I think if there is a God, if there is a divine, which I've come to know that there is, I think in those moments, I don't think that there's this God that smites, that gets mad, that says, how dare you? I think there's this God that says, yes, bring it on. Yes. Because another thing I learned in college that really resonated with me is like, why is we are given these intellectual minds to understand. And so it's okay to want to understand. It's okay to want to battle. It's okay to ask questions and to say, what is the answer? This doesn't make sense. I'm going to look for something else. Do we get it wrong? Sure. We're going to get it wrong completely. But it's okay to, again, have that conversation. It's okay to go to head to head. Again, for me, going head to head has gotten to me where I'm at. It's so weird because nowadays people are like, wow, you're such a person of light. You're such a clearly something is speaking to you. I don't want to get like too vain or whatever. There's only been a couple of people, calm down, but right, you're a woman of faith. And the reason why I am is, again, because I've been willing to go head to head. I've been willing to wrestle with God. I've been willing to say, this doesn't make sense. I don't like it. Come on. I've been willing to have those times, and this is the next part. I've been willing to have those times when I say, what the F, God? You better give me an answer, because if you don't, you clearly don't exist. And guess what God did? Stayed silent. No. All my stories have, usually in my past videos, have well, then God showed up in this way. Or then God showed me that. There have been times in my life, like I've mentioned, where God has stayed silent. Completely silent. Now, those times, again, I wasn't even wrestling with God. That happened about 5 to 6 years ago. I was no longer wrestling with God. I was done with God. If there is a God, if he is all loving, if he did create everything, he, she, it, if we are his creations, I want nothing to do with whoever that person is. I don't. That's where I was 5, 6 years ago. I was just like, if there is a God and he's allowing these really awful, evil things to happen despite us praying, which I don't even know why we have to pray for, I am done. I'm done. Like, I can't imagine a world where I can be more loving than apparently the most loving person, creature, entity, creator in the world. That makes no sense for me. And I don't remember the quote, but Aurelia said something about like, and maybe I should just look it up. Give me 1 second. So it says, live a good life. If there are gods and they are just, then they will not care how devout you have been, but will welcome you based on the virtues you have lived by. If there are gods, but they are unjust, then you should not want to worship them. If there are no gods, then you will be gone, but will have lived a noble life that will live on in the memories of your loved ones. And that's where I was at. That's where I was at. I was at a point of, if God isn't going to be loving, at least I can be. And how this manifested in my life was a couple things. So me and my husband were thinking about having kids, and I was really struggling with it. I was saying, I don't know. It doesn't really make sense to me, because with how the world is and with my life, yes, I've had good things, but I was never given a choice. I was never given a choice to be born. And if I had the choice over again, like, would I choose to go through all this suffering, this evil? I have no control over what my child might go through, and it just doesn't make sense to bring somebody into the world that doesn't have a choice about it, that might experience all of these awful things that there's nobody to save them from, because God's not going to come and save us. They didn't create a world that I would have created. I would have created a much better world if I had, so I said, it just doesn't make sense to me. I don't know if we should have kids. And I was really struggling with this. I was really struggling with life, being here. I was struggling with bringing somebody else into this world. I was struggling with like, why was I brought into this world that it's so awful? Just awful things happen, and not, and I haven't even experienced the most awful things that have happened in this world. I haven't been in the Holocaust, right? And so what it forced me to do, was to take action, was to know my own power, was to know my own role, was to know that maybe God's not coming down to save us, but I can do something to save us. What really forced me to understand what is right and wrong. If there is no God, and if he's not coming down to save us, what is right here? What would I do if I were God? This is what I would do. So then do it. And that was so powerful. Not believing in God really forced my hand. It really forced me to not just read about what right and wrong is, but to know, to feel, to act upon what right and wrong is. And what it led me to is what me and my husband are doing now, which is adoption. I felt really called in my soul, like I'm not God, and I can't control who comes into this world, and I can't control the life experience that they have, and I can't control that they had bad experiences. But if there's somebody in this world that God allowed to come into this world that's having a bad experience, I am going to do my part to help them and to make their experience better, because God may not do it, but I will. And that's where we're at. We're adopting. It really brought me into my own power, my own understanding. I'm not relying on some entity to tell me what's right and wrong. I know deep down in my bones what's right and wrong. And so I'm going to read this again because I feel like this is super powerful. I feel like this is super important. I feel like this super resonates with what I'm just saying. Live a good life. If there are gods and they are just, then they will not care about how devout you have been to them, but will welcome you based on the virtue you have lived for. If there are gods, but they are unjust, then you shouldn't want to worship them. And if there are no gods, then you will be gone, but will have lived a noble life that will live on in the memories of your loved ones. That's just a super powerful, meaningful quote for me. Now, here I am, believing in something divine, believing in God, having faith that people think, it's so weird for people to say you're a woman of faith or you're a woman of light, because my journey is not what you would expect. My understanding of the divine, of God, is not what you would expect. I have wrestled with God. I have not believed in God. I have been triggered by God. I have been all those things, and here I am on the other end. And I guess I'll take a little time to explain that. All of the things that I was so upset at God, the universe, spirit, for allowing to happen, did a full 360. Not only did they do a full 360, but they turned around in a way where they had to go wrong first before they could go right. Not only go right, but go as right as they did. And I took a deep breath when that happened, and I said, oh, okay. I don't understand it all. I don't understand why things had to go right I don't understand why things had to go wrong to eventually go right and to go as right as they did. But here we are. Here we are, where my prayer is answered in an even more amazing way than I would have imagined. And there's something there. There's something there. I can't deny it. And Jen Sincero, the author of You Are a Badass, she talks about this in her book. She says that I was really working on being successful, and I kept reading all these books, and they all had this effing chapter about God's spirit, and I finally said, well, I guess there's something to it. I guess I'll lean into it. And she talks about how she had to call it something different initially. she had to embrace the fact that I don't like the word God. It's causing stuff in my system, but I get that it's out there. And obviously she's a successful author. Obviously she's done really well. Obviously she's inspired a lot of people. And so she had the same experience that I did. Maybe not the same experience, but the same sort of like, okay, there's something out there. I gotta listen to it. It has changed my life. And I've talked about this in a previous video. All things work out for good. If there is a God, all things work out for good. Me being triggered by God forced me to hit a breaking point, to be comfortable wrestling with God. Wrestling with God opened my heart to better understand what's going on in this world. What is the divine? This doesn't make sense. Make it make sense. I'm not going to listen until it makes sense. It forced me into, I'm not going to believe in God. What is right and wrong without God existing? And then it led me to, okay, I get it. I am in my power, and I also now have come full circle to believing in the divine, and I've come full circle to knowing that I don't need to understand everything to know that there's something. So, that's my story. Have a good day.